Hi, everyone. It's Rachel Lang, the Outreach Director for NCGR, and I'm really excited because I am here with Susan Gidel, who is going to be one of our speakers and panelists at the NCGR Symposium that we have coming up in November 5th through 7th. And Susan, I thought we could have a conversation today about financial astrology, which is a topic that we have not talked about on our YouTube page. And it's a topic I'm personally really fascinated by, and I don't know a whole lot of other females who are in this world, and so it's really exciting. I'm so happy that we're here having this conversation today.
Well, thanks for getting in touch and inviting me to speak. I'm thrilled to do that, and it's nice to talk to you this afternoon, Rachel. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about, so do you have did you come into astrology first or finance first, or did you just start with financial astrology? What brought you into this line of work?
So no, the financial stuff came completely first. I grew up on a farm. We raised corn. My dad would come in every noontime and want to turn on the TV to see what the market was doing. And I'm like, how can it change from one day to the next? How much can it change? And anyway, so I studied ag economics and took a lot of they had courses in commodity futures. And so I took those and trying to figure out what the markets did and why. And I worked in the commodity futures business my entire day job career. I started as a journalist and then did some freelance work and ended as a marketing director for a commodity brokerage firm. And so I've been paying attention particularly to the commodity markets for decades. And since they introduced financial futures and stock indexes in the early 1980s, that too has come into that commodity world. And so it was well within my scope of what I was paying attention to. And, you know, honestly, when I was a journalist, I had interviewed people like Arch Crawford and Ray Merriman and Norm Winsky about how they used astrology with the markets and stuff. And I just always thought that was cool. And so, you know, I just added astrology along the way. I started seeing an astrologer here in town, Barbara Shermer, and saw her for nearly 20 years. And so eventually just became interested enough to put them together. I still thought that there was something cool there that I needed to know.
Yeah. Do you think what was fascinating to you? It sounds like with your perspective of growing up in an agricultural family that you were probably really aware of just cycles in terms of the way that.
Oh yeah.
And with economic cycles and then with astrological cycles, do you feel like there's something that draws you into this work, something about the cyclical nature of finance and of astrology that draws you into this work?
You know, I don't think it's so much about the cycles of it. I have a moon in Scorpio, and so for me, it is trying to figure out the secret of it.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Yeah.
That is fascinating to me. It still is. Mm-hmm. I still am fascinated by why markets move every day. Mm-hmm. What makes them change one day to the next? Mm. There's not really that much news that goes on, you know, but they still go up, they still go down, they change. It's not like they stay flat for a week at a time. No, they change every day. Why? So, and I think astrology is the best answer.
Yeah. Was there anything that really surprised you when you were first starting to work with astrology, with financial astrology? Were there any particular trends or any patterns or anything about that was really surprising to you, that was kind of exciting and surprising at the same time?
Actually, it relates to the Saturn-Uranus cycle that I'm going to speak about in November. When I was taking a formal course of study, because I'm a Capricorn sun. That was important to me. I took all the classes at the International Academy of Astrology online. And one of them was about a mundane course, and I had to do like a research paper or something on something mundane. And so I picked something economic, and so I picked the Saturn-Uranus cycle. And what was really fascinating to me is that one began in very early 1897, just a few months after the Dow Jones Industrial Average had begun being calculated regularly. And so the Dow and the Saturn-Uranus cycle are close enough to be, I think, you can kind of watch them in tandem, you know, so that you can. So it was interesting to me to see how the Saturn-Uranus cycle played out in the Dow. And it's been really consistent. We're at the end of our third cycle since the Dow was created in the late 1800s. And it's still hanging in there in terms of its consistency and how it behaves during the Saturn-Uranus cycle. Which is, it makes a bottom at the conjunction. There's a all-time high at the opposition. It corrects significantly in the 30 to 50% kind of range, comes back to make a new high in 6 years after the opposition. And then we get another big record high at the final square, right before the final square or square-ish, which we're in right now.
Yes, I was going to say that's where we are, and we're seeing the highs of the market.
Yeah, and I mean, we'll still see. This one is behaving. This last quarter, all of them are just a little bit different. Through the first 3 quarters, they're all really similar, but the last quarter in each of them has their own little tweak to it. And so it's the final quarter is the most difficult, I think, of the Saturn-Uranus cycle, to try and figure out what prices are going to do and when and why.
Do you think any of that has to do also with Saturn in Aquarius, the rise of cryptocurrency and new ways of investing, new markets?
No.
Okay.
No, there's always new stuff going on. There were telegraphs that made trading different and easier. There were derivatives that changed the tenor of how people could invest. I think, I don't know, to me, it's just always evolution and just to take it in stride.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thinking about the cycle, what are you imagining we'll see as we move toward that next conjunction?
That's the $64,000 question or $1 million question or whatever it is, right? I wish I had a really clear idea. I can say for sure that I think it's going to be really volatile. And before the pandemic hit, I had been speaking about the Saturn-Uranus cycle and warning that, we were going to come up to, because what you had seen in the previous 2 was that the Dow made either its ultimate high for the entire cycle or its penultimate high for the entire cycle, right around the time of the Saturn-Uranus square, and then would collapse by 40-50% kind of thing. So I was, warning as best I could for people to pay attention and to not lose half their 401k and stuff like that. And in 2020, the market topped in February, bottom in March, kind of like I had thought it could, but I was dumbstruck by why it didn't keep going. And I'm still a little That's still a little weird to me, astrologically. But I'm like, okay, well, it did top before the Saturn-Uranus cycle. It did fall by 38%. Okay, I guess that was it. And what it does between now and the end, you know, based on the previous two, we'll find another, there will be another record high. And I mean, we certainly have. There have been more record highs a lot since February of 2020. Now, will it just keep going for another 10 years? I kind of doubt it. But, and that's just me market talking about the way markets move. They don't go up forever. It's not really playing out kind of the way it was in my head. I was thinking, okay, well, this would be a huge crash and then we'll be down and kind of floating along and, you know, through most of the 2020s. I don't know.
Well, do you think things will change with Pluto's ingress into Aquarius?
Well, yeah. And in fact, in getting ready for the talk, I put together this big spreadsheet about all sorts of things that have happened during each phase of the Saturn-Uranus cycle. And it's really interesting in the waning sextile. So we're in the last 60 degrees of the cycle from April of 2025 through January of 2026. And if you throw in, if you cheat a little and pull in 6 months ahead of when that starts, each one of the outer planets changes signs during that period.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be an enormous shift in energy that we're going to have to absorb. And when I say then, and by we, then I mean then the markets have to absorb, because people trade the markets. And if you argue that, well, the algos trade the markets, I said, well, the people still program the algos. So it's still human emotion. It's still human input and shifting emotion, shifting perspectives that make markets move.
Yeah, and I think it's even more now than it has been in the past with forums like Reddit. And when we're seeing like GameStop and actually, I was listening to the Dogecoin. I can't remember if it was the Dogecoin millionaire or a GameStop millionaire, but one of these, which one? It was I think it was on a Wall Street Journal podcast. But I was listening to him, and he was talking about how now more than ever, social media, Reddit, like the culture itself is changing markets more than analyst predictions or anything like that. And he was saying, I follow what's on Reddit and see what everyone's talking about, and that's what you can kind of bank on now. It's almost as if what's happening in the markets, or what is moving, like where we're moving in the markets, is where we've gone with social media, where one influencer can make a big splash and get millions of followers. The same thing's happening with these micro influencers in the financial world.
Yeah, but in the end, the cycles, the way markets respond to planetary transits, I don't think has shifted dramatically, despite that. And once again, I go back to, okay, well, 100 years ago, to have a telephone would put you on the cutting edge, like having a watching Reddit now does. Or, oh my gosh, a telegraph feed from the exchange floor directly into your office. You were way ahead of the times. You didn't have to wait until tomorrow's newspaper to find out what the market had done that day. So, I mean, I think there's always been technology kinds of things and advancements in terms of how people get information and how fast they get information. But despite all of that, the aspects that move markets, I think, are still hanging in there and still behave predictably. Um, you know, despite all of it, you can still watch where transits come in to hit a market's first trade chart, and it doesn't move until that actually clicks in, despite all the buzz that goes around. So
yeah, that's one thing I love about astrology is that cycle, that we can follow these cycles, and that they're informing the bigger shifts and the bigger themes that are happening
for sure.
here in
Sure.
here on the earth. So I want to kind of segue a little bit into, I mean, you mentioned that this is what you'll be talking about at the symposium. And do you want to talk a little bit more about your talk and about what we might take away from it?
Well, I'm going to take a look at the Saturn-Uranus cycle since the country was founded.
Wow. Ooh, this will be fascinating. Because we're going into our Pluto return too.
Yes. So there's been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're in the 6th Saturn-Uranus cycle since 1761. And I just think, like I said, I've my little spreadsheet. It's really interesting to me about things that happened at each of the major things. And for me, it's the conjunction, the opposition, the waning square, and I'm going to throw in also the waning sextile. And did markets behave like I've seen them behave since the Dow started in 1896? And the answer is yes. Even though there wasn't a stock index to follow, there were still financial panics. There were still at the opposition before the final square. There were still financial excesses that needed to be corrected as Saturn and Uranus made hard aspects. And so I just think that's so cool.
It is. It's so cool. Yeah.
And actually, the little blurb I wrote for the talk said there's some surprising little tidbits, and I think those come in at the sextiles. This last sextile, it seems like there are little signs of hope in the last 60 degrees of the cycle that are like, oh, well, isn't that nice? And look at how significant that was in the big scheme of things. Like for example, in the first one, in the waning sextile 1799, the United States government moved to Washington, D.C. in 1800. That's pretty significant. In the next cycle, the first telegram, the third one, Congress for Women's Rights, organized by Susan B. Anthony. You know, it's just, so there's significant economic events that have happened in the waning sextile that I think can give us some hope, because for us, that is in 25 to 26. Once again, when like I say, if you let Pluto in at the end of 24, all 5 outer planets have changing signs. That's only happened once before, 1956. There have been 4 planets change outer signs, a couple other times over this 150 kind of years. And so I think the massive amount of energy shift from the ingresses in 25, 26 are really going to set the tone for us. How the market behaves, I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting. I want to reflect on, have you Georgia Stathis's book, Pushing Through Time?
Yeah.
And one of the things that she reflects on in this book is how that balsamic phase of any synodic cycle is like the action-packed phase. And so I think it really aligns with what you're saying about that waning sextile as well. That's like, it's the closing of the cycle where it's like, we've got to get everything, we have to take care of business before this new cycle begins.
Right. Right. Now, the one thing I'm very clear about, like I said, what path the US stock market will take over the next 10 years, I'm a little fuzzy about what I really think, how that might play out. Although I think there's potential for a big bullish run in the late part of the 2020s. But for sure, whatever happens, I think there will be a huge, we'll make a huge low at the start of the next cycle in 2032 for Saturn-Uranus. And that is the easiest part of the cycle from an investment standpoint. I think it's a low, you buy, you hold for 20 years until you get to the Saturn-Uranus opposition. This next 10 years could be very dicey and hard to manage, but the first 20 years of the Saturn-Uranus cycle, as it goes from conjunction to opposition, is easy. Buy, hold, it rallies.
Oh, this is good. It's good for us to keep into consideration as we're moving toward the end of this decade.
Yeah.
I mean, we're just starting the decade, but as we're we're moving more toward that conjunction.
Yeah, and I am hopeful that people who are way younger than me, who have 20 years after 2032 to enjoy it, don't get scared. Can use astrology to understand that yes, what they're going to experience over the next 10 years could be kind of difficult and may put them off in terms of how to invest. But that's what happens at huge lows at the beginning of the cycle. No one wants to touch it. No one wants to be involved in the stock market at all, which is why it's bearish. It's why it's making a huge low. No one wants it. But you have to have courage to be able to buy it then when it's at a low, when no one else wants it and you think it's the stupidest thing in the world to do. And count on astrology to help you see it through into the opposition, where whatever you own will be at record highs.
Great. Well, I think that
I'm really hopeful for 2030.
Yeah, I know, me too. I'm hopeful too. I think this is a good, let's end on a note of hope. Susan, thank you so much for being with us. And where can people find more about your work and find you?
At my website, susangidel.com. Okay. And I've got a blog, a newsletter I do about the markets, that I want people to use, not for trading recommendations. I don't say buy this here, sell that there. I really want people to just understand that there's activity going on in the sky that affects how we behave. And by we, I mean us as investors, other people who trade for a living. Those same planets are affecting all of us. And making all of us react in certain ways to the news that we're hearing or whatever we're feeling, and that comes out in the stock market and how it behaves. Yeah.
Wonderful. We will post links to all of your offerings under this video, and we look forward to hearing more from you at the symposium and hopefully future events as well.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much.